It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of their lives. The air was warm, the laughter loud, and for hundreds of teenagers across Springfield, Missouri, the world finally felt wide open. It was graduation night, June 6, 1992, the kind of summer evening that felt like the beginning of everything. But for three women, a mother and two teenage girls, that night would mark the end of everything instead. Stacy McCall was 18, bright, cheerful, with that carefree spark that comes with finishing high school. Her best friend, Suzie Streeter, 19, was a little edgier, more outspoken, but just as full of life. They had been inseparable for years, and graduation night was no exception. The two of them hopped between parties, celebrating with classmates and making plans for the future. Their lives stretched ahead of them: college, freedom, adulthood. For a few hours it was nothing but joy. Suzie's mom, Sherrill Levitt, was waiting at home. She was 47, hardworking, well-liked, a hairstylist who had raised her daughter on her own after a divorce. That night she was proud. Her little girl had grown up. She spent the evening on the phone with a friend, talking about minor renovations she'd been working on in the house, completely unaware that her daughter and her friend would be home soon, and that she too would disappear by morning. By midnight the parties were winding down. Stacy called her mother, Janice McCall, to say she and Suzie would be staying at a friend's place for the night. But as often happens after a long night out, plans changed. The house they were supposed to sleep at became crowded, noisy, and uncomfortable. So, sometime around 2 a.m., they decided to head back to Suzie's place, a quiet, one-story home on East Delmar Street. The street was calm. A few porch lights glowed faintly in the distance. The girls probably thought they were safe. Springfield wasn't the kind of place where things like this happened. They arrived, parked their cars in the driveway, and went inside. Everything after that moment becomes a blank space, a mystery no one has ever been able to fill. The next morning, June 7th, Stacy's family expected her home. They had plans to go to a water park together, something fun to cap off the weekend. When Stacy didn't call or show up, her mother started to worry. She dialed the number for Suzie's house. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. It wasn't like her daughter to ignore calls. By midday, friends who had celebrated the night before began to stop by the house. They were just checking in, expecting to find the girls sleeping off a long night. But when they pulled up to 1717 East Delmar, something felt off. 3 cars sat quietly in the driveway: Stacy's, Suzie's, and Sherrill's. Inside, the blinds were partly drawn and there was no movement. The front door was unlocked. The porch light had been shattered, its glass scattered across the step. Some of the visitors thought it was strange, but they swept the glass away so no one would step on it. It was an innocent gesture, but that simple act would later destroy a key piece of evidence. When they stepped inside, it looked like any ordinary Sunday morning. Nothing appeared broken or out of place. On the living room floor sat Sherrill's folded laundry. The women's purses were neatly lined up next to each other. Suzie's makeup bag was on the counter. Their jewelry, cash, and keys were all there. Even their cigarettes, which both women were known to keep close, were untouched. The beds were made, but one of them looked as though someone had just been lying in it. The TV was on, playing faint static. And in that silence, the friends began to feel a rising sense of dread. The house wasn't ransacked. It wasn't a robbery. It was as if the 3 women had simply stood up and walked out into the night. More people began to show up as word spread. Family, friends, concerned neighbors, all of them coming in and out of the house, calling names, checking rooms, touching things, trying to piece together what had happened. Someone even listened to the answering machine. There was a strange, garbled message, something hard to make out, but before police ever heard it, one of the visitors accidentally deleted it while trying to replay it. Another clue gone forever. When police were finally called later that day, the home had already been contaminated. Fingerprints smudged, glass swept away, evidence trampled. Officers could tell right away that this was not a typical missing persons case. 3 people, all vanishing at once, leaving behind everything they owned, was unheard of. They searched the neighborhood, questioned neighbors, combed nearby woods and fields. No one had seen anything unusual. No sounds of struggle. No cars speeding away. No witnesses. The silence was maddening. That night, as darkness fell again over East Delmar Street, the families waited by the phone, hoping for any word. But there was none. By the next morning, the story hit local news: 3 Springfield women missing. Detectives began mapping out a timeline. From 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., the girls had been at graduation parties. Multiple witnesses confirmed they left together. Around 2:15, a friend named Janelle saw them drive off, intending to stay the night somewhere else but changing their minds at the last minute. That was the last confirmed sighting. Some speculated the women might have left voluntarily, maybe a spontaneous road trip. But the evidence didn't fit. Their purses, cash, and even Susie's beloved dog Cinnamon were still there. Cinnamon was found inside, agitated but unharmed, suggesting the women hadn't planned to leave. Over the next several days, police set up a command center. They interviewed friends, classmates, co-workers, anyone who might have seen or heard something. Hundreds of tips flooded in, but most led nowhere. A few stood out. One woman reported seeing a green Dodge van near the house that night. Another claimed she saw a man leading two young women into a similar vehicle around 3 a.m. near a convenience store not far from East Del Mar. But no vehicle was ever found, and the witness descriptions were inconsistent. Meanwhile, the families tried to hold on to hope. Cheryl's co-workers at the salon organized flyers. Stacy's parents appeared on local TV, begging for information. "Someone knows something," her mother said, her voice trembling. "Please just tell us where they are." Detectives began to suspect the women had been abducted. But how? There was no sign of forced entry. All three were healthy, capable adults. They would have fought back or screamed. Yet no one heard a thing. It seemed impossible that three people could be taken from a residential neighborhood without anyone noticing. As days turned into weeks, theories multiplied. Some wondered if Susie's ex-boyfriend might have been involved. Others whispered about a man she testified against in a local trial, someone known for violence. Police interviewed him, but he had an alibi. Another strange detail emerged. Sherrill had recently told friends she felt uneasy, like someone had been watching the house. She'd even installed a new lock just weeks before the disappearance. Whether that was coincidence or instinct, no one could say. With no evidence of a struggle, no ransom demand, and no bodies, the case became one of the most confounding mysteries investigators had ever seen. The police chief called it a disappearance without logic. Behind closed doors, detectives admitted they had almost nothing to go on. They tried hypnosis sessions with witnesses, brought in FBI profilers, even followed tips from psychics. Everything led to a dead end. The families kept searching. Volunteers scoured woods and rivers for miles around Springfield. Helicopters flew overhead. Billboards went up across Missouri. The case even made national news for a brief time, but no one came forward with real answers. By the end of the summer, hope was fading. What had begun as a missing persons case was now looking like something much darker. A triple abduction, maybe even a triple homicide. But without proof, all investigators could do was wait for a mistake, a confession, or a discovery that never came. As months turned into years, the house on East Del Mar became a symbol of loss, an ordinary suburban home frozen in time. The blinds stayed closed, the driveway empty, the laughter that once filled those rooms gone forever. And yet, deep down, families and detectives alike couldn't stop asking the same question. How could three women in the middle of a quiet neighborhood disappear into thin air? No answers ever came that summer. No new leads. Just whispers and rumors that drifted through Springfield like ghosts. But time, as it always does, kept moving forward. And the mystery of the Springfield Three only grew darker. Days turned into weeks, and the search for the three missing women consumed Springfield. The local police department, usually quiet and routine, found itself at the center of one of the strangest mysteries in Missouri's history. What began as a hopeful missing persons case had turned into something darker, something that made even seasoned detectives uneasy. The house on East Del Mar became the focal point. Investigators combed every inch of it, hoping to find even the smallest clue, a fingerprint, a footprint, a fiber out of place. But nothing made sense. There was no sign of a break-in. No blood, no damage, no struggle. Just the eerie stillness of a home that should have been full of life. The only thing they found remotely suspicious was that broken porch light, as if someone had thrown something at it or brushed past it in a rush. But even that offered no real answers. Reporters surrounded the property daily. Satellite trucks lined the street. Springfield had never seen anything like it. The media dubbed them the Springfield Three. Photos of Stacy, Suzie, and Sherrill appeared on every local station and in every newspaper. The community was desperate for answers. People locked their doors earlier, checked their windows twice, and whispered theories that sounded more like ghost stories than real life. Detectives worked around the clock, dividing leads among dozens of officers. Hundreds of tips poured in, each one more bizarre than the last. Someone swore they saw a green van driving erratically near the neighborhood that night. Another caller claimed to have overheard a man bragging in a bar about taking care of three women. But when police chased those leads, they dissolved into nothing. No plates, no names, no real evidence. One theory started gaining traction. Maybe the women had been abducted by someone they knew. The lack of forced entry suggested they might have opened the door willingly. Maybe it was a friend, a neighbor, a familiar face. But if that was true, who would they have trusted enough to open the door for at 2:30 in the morning? Detectives interviewed friends, co-workers, and ex-boyfriends. One name that stood out was Dustin Reck, Suzie's ex. He'd been in trouble before: burglary, some minor violence, nothing major, but enough to raise suspicion. He'd also been caught up in a legal case involving stolen property, and Suzie had testified against him months earlier. That meant motive. Still, Reck insisted he had nothing to do with it and his alibi checked out. But rumors spread quickly, and soon Springfield was full of whispers that the women had been taken in retaliation for that testimony. Then there was another man, Robert Craig Cox. His name alone sent chills through the detectives who remembered his record. A convicted kidnapper, suspected murderer, and drifter who had lived in Springfield around the time the women vanished. He'd been stationed there while working as a utility worker and had a history of abducting women. Police interviewed him multiple times. He was calm, polite even, and denied everything. Years later, from behind bars in a Texas prison, Cox gave an interview to a Springfield reporter. When asked about the missing women, he smirked and said, "They're not alive and they'll never be found." The words sent shivers down everyone's spine. But Cox refused to elaborate. He said he would tell the full story someday, but only when his mother died. He still never said more. While investigators tried to focus on real suspects, the public fed on rumor after rumor. Some claimed the women had been buried under a new hospital parking lot being built around that time. Others said they were taken to another state entirely. Psychic hotlines called in with visions, each one contradicting the last. The police followed nearly every one, no matter how outlandish. None panned out. Detectives also noticed something strange about the phone lines. Neighbors said they had received strange calls in the early morning hours of June 7th. Silent calls, heavy breathing, or hang-ups. One teenage girl even claimed a man called her that morning saying, "You're next." But when traced, the calls led nowhere. It was impossible to know if they were connected or just cruel coincidences. Meanwhile, the families of the missing women refused to give up. Sherrill's son, Bart, searched abandoned buildings and fields on his own. He spent nights driving the back roads of Missouri, convinced his mother and sister were out there somewhere. Stacy's parents printed thousands of flyers, standing on street corners and handing them out in the sweltering summer heat. They held candlelight vigils, prayed on television, and begged anyone with information to come forward. But for every new clue, there was a new dead end. Investigators brought in cadaver dogs, helicopters, and even used early versions of ground-penetrating radar to scan large areas. They found nothing. No bodies. No personal items. No car parts. Just silence. And yet, strange details continued to surface. One woman who lived a few blocks away said she heard something that night around 2:30 a.m., a muffled scream followed by the sound of a car door slamming. She didn't think much of it until the next day when news of the disappearance broke. Another man claimed he saw a small, light-colored car parked awkwardly near the house around that same time. None of it was conclusive, but taken together, it painted a haunting picture of something terrible happening in those quiet early hours. Over time, the case drew attention from the FBI. Profilers were brought in to examine the psychology of whoever might have done this. They believed it was likely someone local, someone comfortable enough to enter a house quietly and control 3 women without causing a commotion. That, in itself, was terrifying. Then came one of the strangest developments in the case. In the mid-2000s, more than a decade after the women vanished, police received a credible tip about a possible burial site beneath a parking garage near a local hospital. A man claimed to have seen suspicious activity around the construction site shortly after the disappearances. Ground-penetrating radar was used to scan the concrete. Investigators found 3 distinct anomalies, shapes that, to some, looked like human-sized impressions beneath the surface. It was enough to cause a stir in the media once again. But the property owner refused to allow excavation. Police didn't have enough probable cause to force it, and the cost of breaking through the reinforced concrete was astronomical. To this day, that garage remains untouched and no one knows what lies beneath. In the absence of solid leads, theories multiplied. Some believed the women were victims of a random predator who had followed them home that night. Others thought it might have been someone who knew Suzie personally. There was even speculation about a serial killer moving through the region, responsible for similar disappearances in nearby states. But despite similarities, none could be definitively linked to the Springfield 3. With each passing year, the case grew colder. Detectives retired. Files gathered dust. New technology like DNA analysis and cell tracking came too late to help. The evidence simply didn't exist. Still, the families never gave up hope. Every holiday, every anniversary, they placed fresh flowers at the empty space where their loved ones should have been. They organized community searches, spoke to reporters, and begged for attention. "We just want to bring them home," Stacy's mother would say through tears. "Even if it's not the way we hoped." Occasionally, strange coincidences rekindled hope. A caller once claimed to be one of the missing women, but the call disconnected before it could be traced. In another case, skeletal remains were found in rural Missouri, only for testing to confirm they weren't related. Every time, hope rose and fell like a cruel tide. The community tried to move on, but the shadow of the Springfield 3 hung over the city. People changed the way they lived. Locks were replaced. Streetlights were kept on longer. Parents warned their daughters never to open the door at night. The case had become a local legend, a ghost story told to remind people that evil could strike anywhere, even in the safest neighborhoods. One detective, years after retirement, admitted in an interview that the case still haunted him. "I've worked murders, robberies, you name it," he said. "But this one is different. You can't close a case without bodies. You can't tell a family it's over when you don't know where they are." As technology advanced, cold case units revisited the evidence. In the early 2010s, new DNA testing was done on items recovered from the house. Nothing usable turned up. The samples were too degraded, too contaminated from all the people who had entered the home that first day. If the perpetrator's DNA had ever been there, it was long gone. The longer the case stayed unsolved, the deeper the mystery grew. Some began to believe the answer might never be found because the crime was too perfect, or too lucky. Maybe it was someone who stumbled into the right opportunity at the right time. Maybe it was someone the women trusted completely and no one ever suspected. Decades after the disappearance, the case still draws investigators, journalists, and true crime enthusiasts. Every new podcast, every documentary, every anniversary brings renewed attention, but no new evidence. It's as if the story itself is cursed to remain incomplete. For the families, the pain never faded. Stacy's mother still keeps her daughter's room the way it was, untouched, a time capsule of a life interrupted. Suzie's brother still drives by the old house sometimes, unable to look away, haunted by what might have happened inside. And for those who lived in Springfield in 1992, the memory remains fresh. The day innocence vanished along with 3 women whose lives ended in silence. More than 3 decades later, people still gather each year at the memorial site. Candles flicker, names are read aloud, and silence falls over the crowd. Somewhere the truth exists, buried under concrete, locked in someone's mind, or lost forever in the quiet of that June night. The Springfield 3 are gone, but their story refuses to fade. Years passed, but the questions refused to die. Springfield moved on, at least on the surface. New houses were built, streets renamed, and children grew up hearing the whispers of 3 women who vanished from a small home on Delmar Street. The house still stood there for a while, quiet and unassuming, like a monument to something unspeakable. People drove by and slowed down, staring at the windows as though expecting to see a flicker of light or a shadow moving behind the curtains. But nothing ever changed. The mystery sat there like a ghost that wouldn't leave. Investigators never closed the case. They couldn't. There were no bodies, no solid suspects, no evidence to justify putting it away. What they had instead were theories, each darker and stranger than the last. One name that kept resurfacing was Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and suspected killer. He was in Springfield around the time of the disappearances, working as a utility worker and reportedly living with his parents. Cox had a disturbing past. Years earlier, he'd been convicted in Florida for the abduction and attempted murder of a young woman who barely survived. He served time, was released, and later ended up in Missouri. The timing was too coincidental for many to ignore. When questioned about the Springfield 3, Cox denied involvement. He smiled through his interviews, calm and deliberate. But years later, while serving another sentence in Texas for unrelated crimes, he gave a strange interview to a local reporter. He claimed that all 3 women were dead, and that their bodies would never be found. When pressed for details, he said he would reveal everything once his mother passed away. It was an eerie confession, one that seemed half boast, half warning. Investigators couldn't confirm a single detail of what he said. They searched for connections between Cox and the victims, but nothing concrete tied him to them. Still, his words haunted the case. Then came a strange twist, a possible sighting. Over the years, There were dozens of reported sightings of the three women, from nearby states to as far as Florida. One truck driver claimed to have seen a woman matching Suzie Streeter's description at a rest stop, terrified and asking for help. Another person said she saw all three women together at a diner weeks after the disappearance. Each lead was checked, each turned up nothing. The sightings became a cruel illusion, false hope that faded every time investigators chased them. Back in Springfield, the families of Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill were living through a kind of quiet agony. Every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary of that June morning was a reminder that their daughters were still out there, somewhere. They refused to believe they were gone. Posters stayed up for years. The local paper reprinted their photos on every anniversary. Donations poured into a reward fund. Police tried new tactics, revisited old evidence, even called in psychics and cadaver dogs. One dog reportedly alerted near a cemented area at a local hospital parking garage, fueling rumors that the women were buried beneath it. But digging up the area was denied, it would cost too much and there was no probable cause. To this day, that garage remains untouched. Another chilling lead came in the form of a tip letter, sent anonymously years after the case went cold. The letter mentioned details about the crime scene that hadn't been made public. The position of the front door, the missing glass from the porch light, the fact that a blanket was missing from Cheryl's bed. Investigators took it seriously, but handwriting analysis went nowhere. Whoever sent it disappeared just like the women had. And still, Springfield couldn't shake the story. It became part of the town's folklore, a cautionary tale whispered to new residents and teenagers out too late at night. The house where it all happened drew curious visitors and amateur sleuths. Some claimed they could feel a heavy presence in the air around it. Others swore they saw flashes of light in the windows as if the house remembered. Eventually, the new owners grew tired of the attention and had the house torn down. The lot was left empty, an open wound in the heart of a quiet Missouri neighborhood. But for detectives like Doug Thomas, who had worked the case for years, the hole left by the disappearance wasn't just emotional, it was professional. It gnawed at him. Every new tip, every phone call, every theory pulled him back into it. He once said that if there were ever a case that could drive a man mad, it was this one. You think you've found the missing piece, he said in an interview, and then it slips right through your fingers. New technology brought new hope. In the early 2000s, DNA analysis had improved dramatically. Evidence from the house was re-examined, hair samples, fingerprints, and even vacuum sweepings from the carpets. But degradation and contamination made most of it useless. There simply wasn't enough physical evidence left to tell a story. Whoever took those women had been careful, too careful. Some theories began to take on a darker edge. One idea was that the women had stumbled upon something they shouldn't have seen, maybe a drug deal or a criminal operation involving someone local. Another theory suggested the crime was premeditated, targeting Suzie because of her ex-boyfriend's connections to a criminal ring. Police had questioned him early on but could never link him to the crime. Still, whispers persisted that this wasn't random. Over the years, a small but devoted group of online sleuths kept digging. They analyzed phone records, mapped the routes the women might have taken, and even used 3D recreations of the house to study the timeline. Some believed the abductor may have been inside the house waiting for them to return. Others thought the women were tricked into leaving voluntarily, maybe by someone pretending to be a friend in distress. It's that theory that still chills people most, that someone they trusted could have lured them away under the guise of safety. Because there were no signs of a struggle. Nothing was broken. The beds were unmade as if they'd never even gone to sleep. It looked like they simply walked out the door. Even the phone messages left behind added to the confusion. One message was erased before police could listen to it. Investigators believe it may have contained a clue, maybe even the voice of the person responsible. But whoever it was, and whatever they said, it's gone forever. In 2019, a new detective named Sergeant Todd King took a fresh look at the evidence. He brought in specialists from across the country, hoping new technology could uncover something everyone else had missed. But despite advanced scanning and data reconstruction, the result was the same. And yet, for all the theories, for all the technology, the truth remains locked away, maybe buried under concrete, maybe hidden in someone's conscience. If Robert Cox knows something, he hasn't said more. If there were others involved, they've taken their secrets with them. Every so often the case gets a new tip. Someone hears something, remembers a rumor, sees a face that looks familiar. Detectives chase it down, but it always ends the same way, silence. Still they keep trying. Because even decades later, The promise made to the families hasn't been forgotten, that they would never stop searching. Springfield has changed, but if you walk its quiet streets late at night, you might feel it, that lingering unease that something terrible once happened here. The story of the Springfield 3 isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder of how fragile normal life can be. One night, 3 women were laughing, planning for the future. The next, they were gone, swallowed by the dark. And whoever knows what happened that night, if they're still alive, they're living with it. Somewhere, someone still carries that secret. Maybe they look at the same moon that once shone over Delmar Street and wonder if the world still remembers. It does. More than 30 years later, the house is gone, but the echoes remain. Their names, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Sherrill Levitt, have become symbols of unanswered questions and quiet sorrow. Their families still wait, still hope, still light candles every June. And as the years slip by, the haunting truth is this: sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones with monsters or ghosts. They're the ones that never end. Yet, another mystery frozen in time. Another case without answers. But somewhere out there, the truth is waiting. Join me next as we open another file and step deeper into the dark. Don't forget to subscribe, you won't want to miss what comes next.